Namaskar, and thank you for joining us on our continued coverage of the US presidential election. Our correspondents Amritpal Singh and Shubhendu Ghosh are on the ground in Washington, D.C. and Palm Beach, Florida. And this is a keenly contested election, as we've been telling you, with both the Democrats and the Republicans hoping for large turnouts on voting day. And because that's the only way they feel that either side can be assured that they are going to win or do their best to win. Well, voting for the 2024 U.S. presidential election is underway. The U.S. is witnessing a tight election battle between the Republican former president, Donald Trump, and his Democratic rival, the current Vice President Kamala Harris. Various polls have predicted a neck-and-neck contest, which brings the focus on the swing states to decide the fate of the presidential election. A race churned by unprecedented events, 2 assassination attempts against Trump, President Joe Biden's surprise withdrawal, and Harris's rapid rise. They remained neck and neck after billions of dollars in spending and months of frenetic campaigning. If Harris wins, she would make history, becoming the first woman, the first Asian American, and the first black woman to win the presidency, while a Trump victory would also be historic. He'd join Grover Cleveland as the only president. He'll be joining him, so there'll be only 2 presidents who have served non-consecutive terms if he wins. Now, since the United States is divided in different time zones, the eastern part of the country has been polling first, and some parts of it have concluded their polling, and more than 80 million Americans have already voted before Tuesday, either by mail or also in person in the early voting. And lines at the polling stations on election day were also quite well organized and orderly. There were some glitches of vote counting technology, where these were reported in Cambria County in Pennsylvania, and a local court agreed to extend voting hours by 2 hours on Tuesday night. A hoax bomb threat, in fact, many of which had come through, and they originated from some Russian email domains. They were directed at polling locations in 3 battleground states of Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That was when voting was underway, the FBI said, but none of these threats were immediately determined to be credible. Opinion polls show that the candidates are running a neck-and-neck race in each of the 7 states likely to determine the winner. These states are Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And the latest update from the U.S. presidential polls, well, the polls have closed in parts of Indiana and Kentucky, and the polls will close in Georgia, South Carolina, Vermont, additional parts of Indiana and Kentucky and Virginia by 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's about 5:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Now, the last state to close polls will be Alaska at 1 a.m. ET. That's at 11:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Okay, we have some preliminary result. This is exit polls, actually, conducted by the Edison Research. Results are being continuously updated as additional poll responses are being gathered. Now, in Wisconsin, 44% of the voters view Trump favorably, and 47 of them view Harris favorably. In Nevada, Trump has 47% favoring him, while Harris has 44%. In Michigan, Trump is 45%, while Harris is at 48%. In Pennsylvania, Trump is at 47% and Harris at 46%. This is as per the exit polls of Edison Research. The former U.S. President and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump cast his ballot on Tuesday in Florida for the presidential election, and he spoke to reporters after that. He said that he's ready to concede defeat if the election results were fair. But once again, he voiced concerns about the security of electronic voting systems.
Lose an election, if it's a fair election, I'd be the first one to acknowledge it. And I think so far, I think it's been fair. I think there's been A lot of court cases. Both sides are lawyered up. Thousands of lawyers are involved. Thousands. Can you imagine? And part of that is because we have too complicated a process. If we had a piece of paper watermarked, you know that paper is more sophisticated now than computers. It's watermarked paper. You cannot. It's unbelievable what happens with it. There's nothing you can do to cheat.
Well, asked about fears of unrest after the election and whether he would call on supporters to avoid violence, he criticized the question itself, and he said that his supporters are not violent.
That there'll be no violence. Of course there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people. I don't have to tell them that. And I certainly don't want any violence, but I certainly don't have to tell. These are great people. These are people that believe in no violence.
Well, Donald Trump also raised concerns about the use of electronic voting machines after casting his vote in Florida. He reiterated his previous criticisms of electronic voting machines, suggesting that they were less secure than paper ballots and they would delay the outcome being known.
Thing like that should never happen. This election should be over. They spend all this money on machines. And frankly, if they'd use paper ballots, it would be over by 10 o'clock. And by the way, the paper ballots would cost 8%. It would be 8% of the cost. If they would use paper ballots, voter ID, proof of citizenship, and one-day voting, it would all be over by 10 o'clock in the evening. It's crazy.
Well, the Republican nominee Donald Trump cast his vote in West Palm Beach in Florida, and DD India's correspondent Amritpal Singh reports from Ground Zero over there.
I'm right now outside the polling booth where Republican candidate Donald Trump has just voted. He said that he's confident that he will make it back to the White House as his voter base has turned out in large numbers to vote. But more importantly, Donald Trump said that there will be no violence from his camp. He said these reports about violence are not true. He called them fake and said that he's appealed for no violence, for fair and smooth elections. He said if it were a paper ballot, the results would be known by now, basically casting aspersions on the voting process, hinting that there could be a voter fraud, but at the same time trying to say that his voter base has turned out across the country in large numbers and he's confident that he'll make it to the White House. With cameraman Sanjay Jaina, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India at West Palm Beach, Florida.
Well, even as voting progresses, both Republicans and Democrats are confident of their victory. DD India correspondent Amritpal Singh judges their mood outside Trump's beach house at Mar-a-Lago.
This is Donald Trump's beach house, Mar-a-Lago, at West Palm Beach in Florida. I'm right outside Mar-a-Lago, which has become the election headquarters of Donald Trump. It is from here Donald Trump is watching the election results. To give you a sense of what the atmosphere here right now is, there are people out on the streets outside Mar-a-Lago, understandably Republican supporters, people out here carrying Trump banners, American flags, supporters, Republican supporters, even as the voting goes on. And once the trends start coming in, we would know how much have the Republicans come out and voted. To talk about how the Republicans are shaping up. Here you're wearing a t-shirt saying "Women for Trump." Do you think on the abortion issue what stand Kamala Harris has taken cuts ice with the women of this country?
I do. I think if you mean by cuts ice, like has divided this country, yes, I do. I think it shouldn't even be an issue anymore. We're in 2024. President Trump is for women's health, for women's safety, like keeping men out of women's sports. He didn't take the right to an abortion away for rape victims, for incest victims, women who might die if they carry the baby to term. All he did was overturn Roe versus Wade and bring it from the federal government back to each individual state. And I don't know any state out of the 50 states in our country that tell people they may not have an abortion. They have to have the abortion within their term limits, whatever that may be. So I think Kamala Harris is pushing this women's rights issue, and the women just aren't researching it for themselves, or they're just listening to whatever. They don't even care. They're just hearing this and they're getting so upset, and that's not what he has said.
So clearly the opinion here in the United States is divided. Once the figures come in, we would know how many women, how many young voters have voted for Kamala Harris, or will it be Donald Trump who emerges as the winner from this race? With cameraman Sanjay Jaina from outside the Mar-a-Lago in West Palm Beach, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India.
The Democratic presidential nominee and the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris visited the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. on the election day, and she expressed her gratitude to phone bankers who are supporting her campaign. During her visit, Harris personally connected with multiple callers, encouraging them to cast their votes. Harris is the first female vice president, and she would be the first woman, black woman and South Asian American to win the presidency if she does so. Well, Shubhendu Ghosh is joining us live now from Washington, D.C. with an update. Shubhendu, so what, it's now obviously probably comes to the end of polling time there. Fill us in with what we are to expect.
Right, Mark. I continue to be at that polling station I was about an hour ago, where long queues were seen. Now the queues have disappeared. People who had come have been able to vote. There are many people who are still coming in and dropping their postal ballot at this box that has been kept here to accept the ballot box and the votes. I asked them about how long the voting will continue. The authorities here say that 8 p.m. is the cutoff time for people to be in the queue. If anybody is in the queue till 8 p.m., they will be allowed to vote. It's about 6:45 here in Washington, D.C. local time. We've seen very encouraging voting, long queues all through the day across the polling stations at Washington, D.C. Quite reminiscent of the kind of encouraging voting that we saw during the early voting. Over 80 million people had already exercised their franchise even ahead of the election day, and similar trends were seen today, election day. About an hour from now, at many places around the East Coast, the states would be concluding their polling, and the polling would close. But 8 p.m. is likely to be the deadline for people to be in the queue to exercise their franchise. One last opportunity.
Right. Shubhendu, to avoid people standing in the queue for a long time, they have provided different kinds of systems such as mail voting, voting through, by mail ballots, as well as also absentee voting. Can you fill us in about, the other systems of voting?
That's right, Mark. In that sense, it's an organized democracy with a lot of reforms. Here in the United States, you can vote in different ways. First, of course, there is early voting and the voting on the election day. Absentee voting, if you cannot come in person, and if you can give a proper excuse for the reason why you cannot come and drop your ballot at the voting center, you can give a reason, and as an absentee voter, you will be allowed to vote. Your postal, your voting card will, your ballot will reach your house, and you can exercise your franchise and send it through a post. Then, of course, there are postal ballots. You can fill those ballots, and you can come here at the polling stations and drop those ballots. You can stand in the queue and you can get access to the document, the 6-page long document where you put your vote for the different candidates besides the president, other candidates such as in Senate and House of Representatives as well, and you can exercise that. So in that sense, very unique, a system which is meant to encourage more and more people to exercise their franchise. By law, some 45 days in advance, across different states, people were eligible to vote in these elections, but today is the final date, about 8 o'clock,
right,
at least Eastern time, and also the time difference taken into account in the West Coast, the polling will close. So this hectic electioneering, one phase of it, concludes in a short while from now. Mark?
Right, and despite all these reforms that have made voting easy, did you see, some sort of voter apathy, or would you say that there have been, the people have come out wholeheartedly and tried to vote, and that the voting percentage is going to be very, very high?
It is most likely going to be the latter, Mark. From what we have seen in the early voting trends, the encouraging number, it's already a record number, over 80 million people voting in advance. Republicans also coming forward, that's sort of a new record in itself, coming out with as high numbers as the Democrats. Women voters coming out in large numbers as far as the early voting is concerned. And here too, across polling stations in Washington, D.C., we've seen long queues, and the people we've spoken to, more than voter apathy, what we could sense was voter anxiety. They think it's a very closely fought election. They think that the issues that the election is fought over, whether it's abortion or the borders, illegal immigration, these are issues that directly affect their lives. And the two leaders, the key contenders for the White House, have taken such opposing stand that it is very, very important for the voters to really calibrate what combination of issues and the positions they're going to take, and they're coming in large number therefore to vote because they think it's not an election so polarizing it has been, not an election where one can afford to really sit at the margins and watch it from the outside. They want to be a part of it and do their bit.
Right. Also, Shubhendu, we've seen that the country is so clearly divided into red and blue, and some states never change. Are we likely to see some sort of surprises this time round, or it's only these 7 swing states that are going to always decide the presidential elections in the United States?
Well, it's difficult to answer that one, Mark, but given that there are many firsts in these elections, to begin with, the voter participation, the kind of narrative that the two leaders had put forth, which made this such a polarized contest, it won't be surprising if we get some interesting figures and developments, as you mentioned, also from the non-swing states. The issues deeply divide the people. I could give you an example that many voters that we spoke to, the cities that we traveled to, they traditionally, many Republican supporters, they said that we support Republican, we've been voting for them for years, but the issue of abortion as a woman, they would say that it is very close to us, and therefore we're not sure what our final vote is going to be. Similarly, an example involving the Democrats, educated, young, liberal immigrants, Indian Americans and also others, who spoke very passionately about how they've been traditionally Democrat supporters, but the issue of illegal immigration resonates with them. They do think it's a problem. They do think that Democrats, perhaps because it was a Democrat government, and perhaps they did not do enough. In fact, in the past couple of years, America has seen one of the largest influx of illegal immigrants, right, more in New York. That's where we spoke to these people. And they were concerned that, although we are traditional Democrat supporters, we need someone to deal with this issue with a strong hand, because if illegal immigration does not stop, one of the first section of population it threatens are the legal immigrants, because they have to wait for longer, they have to scavenge for resources. So in that sense, we see a great deal of overlap in Democrat and Republican supporters, Mark. It'll be interesting to see finally what choices they make and who they choose as their leader.
Right. Some of the analysis that has been made is that the Democrat voter of a few decades ago could be a Republican today, in the sense that the issues that the Democrats used to talk about back then are pretty much the issues that the Democrats are that the Republicans are talking about now. Maybe the Republicans are progressing a little slower than the Democrats. And over a period of time, there's going to be some sort of movement between this voter base. And do you see that, by talking to people, that, there could be in generations, there could be differences in terms of voting in families, for instance?
there are some trends that we're looking at. Mark, that's a very interesting point that you've raised, and it also has to be sort of understood a little delicately because there are so many levels of complications involved in it. Just for an example, taking a cue from what you said, the traditional Democrat supporter, the middle class, the lower middle class in America would go with the Democrat traditionally. The elites, the rich, would be Republican supporters. But we've seen some fractures that are coming in there. We've seen, especially when we were engaging with college-going students, we see that the middle class also is experiencing a certain fracture. The educated, college degree holding youngsters, professionals, they still have their loyalties with the Democrats because they've also benefited from certain interventions, whether it's about tackling the loan burden of the students or creating more opportunities for immigrants and welcoming them is concerned. But at the same time, the blue-collar workers here in America, Mark, who do not have a college degree, who are working in different vocations and to make their ends meet, they feel a little left out from the larger democratic narrative and the provisions that the Democrats have had, the welfare measures. These blue-collar workers feel that it really hasn't addressed their concerns. It has really aimed at college-going, educated elites in terms of professional elites. And therefore, that middle class is getting fractured, and a part of it is then moving to Republicans, hoping that they would address their concerns in a better manner. Latino vote is also interesting to study, Mark. Latinos we refer to as people coming in from Latin America. Again, as immigrants, traditionally, the immigrants are seen as being welcomed by Democrats, and therefore they also return the loyalty by supporting the Democrats. But Latinos who've settled down here over the years, who've become citizens who are Americans, who are voting, they also, in a very interesting way, stop identifying themselves as immigrant, and they like to project their identity as American as it gets. And that identity, that sort of slightly bordering on a nationalist sort of an identity, resonates more with the Republican Party. So we see those interesting trends happening, the traditional Democrat voters slipping into the Republican territory, and vice versa.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Shubhendu Ghosh, for joining us for the moment. Now, the New Hampshire hamlet of Dixville Notch, it opened its polling at the stroke of midnight on Tuesday, traditionally marking the start of the U.S. election, hours before the rest of the country. People in Michigan enthusiastically lined up at polling stations to cast their votes. Michigan is one of the 7 key battleground states where the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is running neck and neck with the former U.S. President Donald Trump. Voters in North Carolina, Georgia, New York and New Hampshire also cast their ballots on Tuesday.
I'm here first thing in the morning. I think it's very important to, whatever you're doing today, if you haven't voted, get out and vote. It's a right that not everybody in the world gets, so you have to take advantage of it, and it does matter. It will change your life. You never know what kind of legislation is going to happen, so, you know, take advantage of your rights.
It is so important that everyone comes out to vote today. It is an election like no other. And if you have any thoughts of not voting, today is the day to change your mind. You can do voting today, even if you're not registered to vote. And it will be an important part of our history as Americans that today you have gone and voted. And it's important whether you vote Democrat or Republican. It is a special thing to be able to vote for your candidate.
Well, voters in the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania came out to vote in what polls have shown is also a neck-and-neck race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Both candidates have raced to pitch for support in Pennsylvania, which is expected to play a pivotal role in deciding this week's U.S. presidential election. The Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance cast his vote in Cincinnati in Ohio. J.D. Vance joined millions of Americans who were headed to the polls to choose the president.
I felt good about my own race a couple of years ago when I voted in this exact same spot. Hopefully it goes as well for President Trump and me as it went for me a couple of years ago in the state of Ohio.
Amid the ongoing voting, the American citizens have expressed their views on the two candidates, highlighting the significance of voting in shaping their country's future. Key issues such as border security, abortion, and illegal immigration emerged as primary considerations influencing their decisions.
I voted for Kamala, and I think it's especially important because just all the ridiculous and outrageous things that Trump are saying, and he's trying to make America a fascist state again. And as people of color and as a woman, I thought it's important that we have to vote this time.
I voted for Trump, and I don't know not about politics, but I think he's good for the economy. But I don't know that much about the election because it's my first time voting. So
I want to vote for the candidate that has values, that backs his values, that backs it with fairness, that makes sure that in America, it doesn't matter if your name is Martin or Mohammed, Patrick or Patel, Singh or Smith, that you get not ahead on the color of your skin, but the content of your character. So the candidate who does that, and I know in my heart who that is.
Abortion is really important to me. I think immigration laws are really important to me. Recessions and economics are really important to me. And I think it impacts not only students, but everybody else.
I think it's in God's hands, and whoever's supposed to win is going to win, and that's where I'm coming from.
I just hope they do it right, you know. I'd rather they do it right than just rush through it.
I'm here first thing in the morning. I think it's very important to, whatever you're doing today, if you haven't voted, get out and vote. It's a right that not everybody in the world gets, so you have to take advantage of it, and it does matter. It will change your life. You never know what kind of legislation is going to happen, so, you know, take advantage of your rights.
It is so important that everyone comes out to vote today. It is an election like no other. And if you have any thoughts of not voting, today is the day to change your mind. You can do voting today, even if you're not registered to vote. And it will be an important part of our history as Americans that today you have gone and voted. And it's important whether you vote Democrat or Republican. It is a special thing to be able to vote for your candidate.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Capitol Police on Tuesday arrested a man at the visitor center, and he was carrying a torch and a flare gun. This is what the police said in a statement. The Capitol Visitor Center was closed while authorities conducted their investigation. The arrest occurred as the voting is underway in the United States. The Democratic vice presidential candidate and the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, expressed his confidence about the battleground state of Pennsylvania on Tuesday after making a campaign stop at Harrisburg. He said that he and the Vice President Kamala Harris were excited about their chances in Pennsylvania.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just came from the diner. Going to board the plane and head to D.C. We're feeling great. I just want to remind folks, still got a plan to vote. A lot of time for these polls to be open. iwillvote.com if you need it. And I think the choice couldn't be starker. We saw the closing arguments of one of hopefulness, unity, and a focus on the middle class. The other one of dark, divisive, focused on himself. So we're feeling good about this, America. Get out, get this vote done, and let's win this thing. We're excited about Pennsylvania. I think being here, we started it here. For me, it feels like closing the loop. We're excited about being here. We're taking that positive message, and you saw the energy in that room.
Well, we are joined by our guest, Dr. Rajan Kumar, professor from the School of International Studies in JNU, and Preeti Uppala, geopolitical analyst from Las Vegas. Thank you, both of you, for being with us. Ms. Uppala, let me start with you. You know, what are your expectations from this election? I mean, who do you expect to win, first of all?
Namaste, and thank you so much for having me. It's this is truly such a consequential election, I think, of our times for all of us, with the great geopolitical ramifications. It's a very divisive, quite a hateful, polarized election so far, and it's just warming up. I think hopefully in a few hours we'll start to see which way the political winds take us. Usually elections are divided on left, on right, but I think this is the first time where we are seeing really the main divide here is a gender divide. Whereas you find a lot of young liberal women, just women in general, coming out to vote in droves for the Democratic Party. And then you see a lot of men who have been perhaps they feel disenfranchised today in many ways. They're coming out like never before to vote for the Republicans, for President Trump. So it's going to be a very interesting election. I think this is the one election where both political experts, pollsters, even astrologers are finding it difficult to agree on a winner. So even they are divided. One of two things is going to happen. Either the polls were spot on and it's going to be a very, very tight election, which means that we'll not know who the winner is for probably several weeks to come because it's going to be highly contested. The other option is that actually the polls had it completely wrong, and it's a landslide victory. I think right now at this moment, nobody knows which of those two options are going to manifest. I think the whole world really watches to see how America chooses to vote, and I think a lot of people are voting. There's a lot of first-time voters. People are voting for, whether it's immigration, the economy, border security, national security. And then on the other hand, I think women's rights, specifically abortion, has somehow really made it to the ballot. And I think it's really the dichotomy of these two kinds of rights and values that America seems to be divided on. It's funny, it's an election where almost $2 billion has been spent, and just a few tens of thousands of voters in 7 swing states are going to ultimately decide the result.
Right.
That affects all. It's very, very interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of Indian Americans who traditionally used to vote Democrat. I think there has been a slight change of heart for various reasons. So we're even seeing the Indian American community shift, I think. There's far more people coming out openly and voting for Trump this time. So it'll be very interesting to see which way the polls swing and which way the result goes.
Dr. Rajan Kumar, how would you look at it? Some analysts look at it as say that the Democrats may have underestimated the popularity of Trump because it's in any case, he's the central figure of the election. It's either you love him or you hate him. And the other issues are probably not as important at the end of the day because, though they do matter, people are just voting whether they, like this man or dislike this man.
Absolutely, Mark. First, thank you for having me here. And let me tell you that this is very tight election and very keenly contested. And America at this moment looks completely divided. Divided in terms of ideology, divided in terms of gender, divided in terms of race, and also to some extent geographical division. So what I see is that there is a very polarized kind of America which we are seeing in this election, and Trump being the most polarizing figure today. And he's popular. He has been the president of America, so he's very well known to the entire American citizen. So there are a number of issues which have divided the people on these lines. What I mentioned just now, I think some of the people think that that Trump does not believe in democracy, so that has become an issue there, and people are saying that this is an election where it's a democracy versus fascism or democracy versus some kind of authoritarianism. So that is one issue. As Ms. Pala pointed out earlier, that gender has become a very important issue because the debate is about how do you consider the gender, how do you define gender, and then women versus men. That issue is there. Kamala Harris has massive support among women, but equally the white men they support Trump. So that gender has become a real issue there. Then you have economy. Trump is on the economic issue. Trump has better support compared to Kamala Harris because many of the white people and also the other people, they think that the economy is not doing that well, and that need for reform, etc.
Right, Professor Rajan Kumar. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's only one vote, and you're voting on one of these issues. So I mean, I suppose the economy, Trump is always scoring more. But then if you look at abortion, obviously, Kamala Harris is scoring more. So at the end of the day, I mean, if a person has to decide between these two issues, how do they decide which person to go with?
I think abortion is very important, gender is very important, and on the issue of gender, if you're a woman, you are likely to vote for Kamala Harris. And there are also other issues where people vote across the traditional stereotypes. For instance, on the issue of economy, some of the black people also support Trump. But there are also, for instance, immigration. On the issue of immigration, people are divided there, and also divided in the geographical region. So where you are located, that also matters, because what has happened in the last few years, if I tell you, the American population has grown primarily because of the immigration and mostly Hispanic population. If you see the growth of America, so Hispanic people from earlier it was 12%, now it has gone up to 19% approximately, and the other population remains static in comparison to that. So immigration has become a very, very important issue, and on the issue of immigration, Trump is the favorite. Trump is favored by a lot of people. So abortion, immigration, gender, economy, so these are the issues. And if I tell you the stereotypes, so white male population, in conservative, non-educated. Also, let me tell you that roughly 65% of the people in US have not seen the college. So that population, white population, that is likely to vote for Trump. But
Right.
Educated and immigrant and women, they are likely to support Kamala Harris. So that's how you kind of locate yourself, in this voting.
Ms. Uppala, so would you say that, I mean, amongst all these issues, perhaps the Republicans have underestimated the importance of the Roe v. Wade being overturned? And as a result of that, I mean, they probably are looking at all these other issues where Trump is likely to score more, and thinking that perhaps the electorate is going to go over that. But then you're seeing huge queues of women, and they're probably getting worried as to whether that's, going to change the fate of this election.
I actually think that both parties underestimated each other. I would say even the left underestimated how important the economy has, how hit the American population has been in the past 4 years. Also, the immigration, border security, national security. These issues are not just affecting, traditionally conservatives. It's affecting everybody, even in very blue states. I'm from California, so there's a lot of people from California, because it happens to be a border state. Illegal migration affects Californians greatly. So for the first time, we're seeing them be, very critical, I think, of the administration's lack of efforts in the last 4 years. I think you have to vote though, and there's a plethora of events. I think you have to issues. I mean, the voter needs to ask himself or herself, right. What really has been the most pivotal issue, and sometimes it's split between gender, and other times it's location, and also just your social economic strata. But I think across the board, Americans don't feel like they are seeing their best days at the moment. I travel a lot around the world, and right. I have to say, America has become a bit of a laughing stock, and you see the rest of the world and who don't look up to America. They don't see the U.S. as a police or a leader, a global leader, sure. or anything like that. So in that respect, both voters, both kind of voters want to see a better tomorrow, and which leader they think is going to get them there is who they're going to vote for. I think it's very exciting because of the time differences. We're going to start seeing the results very quickly. I think Georgia is first to go. It's going to start trickling in, and we'll know very quickly which way the winds are taking us this time. So it's just very exciting.
Ms. Uppala, given what you're saying, and you're from California, and it's it's been blue for the longest time, and we've seen that Elon Musk has talked a lot about the state and how it, he feels that it's not really fair in many respects. He talked about how people can vote without any, what is that called? Proof, ID proof, yeah, voter ID proofs and things like that. And the question is whether that is a free and fair election that's taking place there. And the fact that, given what you're saying, is there a possibility that, it can stop being blue, or it's going to remain blue forever? How does it remain blue? How do these states remain blue and red when there's so much disappointment in an incumbent government? Oh, I can't hear you, ma'am.
This is why the electoral college becomes the college becomes very, very important, because that gives, I think, equal opportunity to all the states, whether you happen to be California with 50 odd states, or Nebraska or someone like that, and they have a handful of states, because I think every voice counts, every vote matters. California is blue. Usually they swing that way, so of course you're going to get a bunch of seats that way, but that it doesn't mean California doesn't represent the United States of America. You have 350 million people, and it's pretty split across the border, across the board right now. So I don't see California turning red anytime soon. However, I think the number of smaller races within California, we're going to see a lot more conservatives win these races. We had a conservative governor for a while, and of course Ronald Reagan is from the Republican Party, and he's from California too. So we have so I think sometimes you do see a big wave. I will say this though, there's a lot of closet conservatives out there in California who, depending on whether or not Trump wins this election, I think they're going to feel a little emboldened to come out and perhaps be more open about their political leanings. And I hope that people are able to share their views without feeling like they're going to be canceled. We pride ourselves on being this great country that has freedom of expression and freedom of speech, but I think in the last several years we've seen so many instances of those rights.
Ms. Uppala, let me stop you there. We are getting some projections, preliminary results coming in from various sources. My producer tells me that he's going to play them out now. So let's wait for these to come in. We have some preliminary results from various sources. Donald Trump, according to AP, has taken the state of Indiana, and Harris has taken the state of Vermont. This is Associated Press. Donald Trump wins Indiana, Harris wins Vermont. Trump takes Kentucky, and polls close in the first 6 U.S. states, including the swing state of Georgia. So this is what we get. I'm also joined by my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran, who's with us in the studio. Ramesh, can you throw some light on these results? These are generally red states and blue states?
Right. So, Mark, just to bring our viewers up to speed with the latest news we are tracking on our coverage, we have projected winners on 3 seats: Indiana, South Carolina, Kentucky, all 3 where Trump is projected to be winning. So as the graphics on the screen show, Trump is winning Indiana, South Carolina and Kentucky, whereas Kamala Harris is leading and has probably won Vermont. But that said, the numbers as they stack up at the moment, based on projections, is 28 to Trump and 3 to Kamala Harris. Just to repeat, Trump is projected to win or has won Indiana, where 11 votes were at stake, South Carolina with 9 votes up for grabs, and Kentucky with 8 votes up for grabs, making a total of 28 at the moment for Trump, and just 3 for Kamala Harris, who is leading or has won Vermont. That's the news we are tracking here on U.S. election breaking, Mark.
Right, indeed. And none of these are the swing states, so they were on expected lines, one can say.
And also, if I can just quickly bring our viewers up to speed with where the polls are closing or have closed already. Reports suggest that the polls have closed in the states of Kentucky, Indiana, South Carolina, Virginia, Vermont, and Georgia, the key swing states there. Next would be a couple of more states as we move westward, moving away from the eastern seaboard across the mainland of the U.S. further westward. More states will see polls closing. But as of now, we have reports that polls have closed in the 6 or 7 states, including Georgia, the key state, the swing state. So Kentucky, Indiana, South Carolina, Virginia, Vermont, and Georgia, polls have closed there. Meanwhile, reports
Georgia
also
and Pennsylvania
coming in,
are close by, so that should be...
reports also coming in, Mark, that Trump is alleging cheating in Philadelphia and Detroit, but officials in Philadelphia in particular have refuted those claims. They say no such thing has happened as claimed by Trump. And exit polls also suggest, remarkably, surprisingly at that, Mark, that as far as national voter sentiment is concerned, based on the exit polls, in fact, the numbers say that 35% of voters say democracy is the biggest issue for them, followed by economy by 31%. 14% rate abortion as a third most important issue. 11% say immigration, and only 4% say foreign policy. And just to add quickly there, Mark, 51% of the voters say we trust Trump when it comes to the economy, and 73% say democracy is under threat. Mark.
Indeed. Let's turn to Professor Rajan Kumar. Professor Rajan Kumar, what do you make of these initial results?
Thank you, Mark. I was reminded of my college days. I was in University of Kentucky, so that was a red state, although the educational institutes are very liberal. So that was an expected line, and many of my professors are there, they're still there. So, those Indiana going to this Trump, that was again expected, Vermont going to Kamala Harris. So these are the early predictions, and I think, they're also accurate, but they're very pre-decided states in the sense that they're either blue or red. So I don't think, that captures the real image. The real image will start when you start getting results from either from Georgia, nearby North Carolina, and then on the little upper side you have Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and on the other side, just below California, you have that Arizona and Nevada. So from those states, if the results start coming, then that will give you a real picture that where is it going. Trump has said that Pennsylvania there is a fraud, but according to some of the latest polls, they are saying that in Pennsylvania, this Trump is leading. So I don't know why he's making this kind of claim. But again, Trump being Trump, he's known for making such, these kind of allegations on his Truth Social, his social media forum, etc. But these are the early indications. We cannot make much out of it. These went as expected, so there has been no change, and we'll have to wait and see.
Indeed, Ms. Uppala, the polls had suggested that people who had already decided who they were going to vote for well in advance of the last few days. Some had decided, like in September itself, they were clear who they were going to vote for. They haven't changed their opinion. There was a poll that I was reading that said, 9 out of 10 people had already decided who they were going to vote for. So the last few days are not really didn't make much of an impact. What would you say? I mean, is that the way generally Americans would be thinking about this election? After all, they've had such a long campaign, and they've also had plenty of time to vote, early voting.
Absolutely. Most Americans know who they were going to vote for, I think, weeks and months, some years, in some instances, years ago. So it's a very small number of undecided voters, really specifically in these 7 swing states that were the key target market for both of these two parties, right? So $2 billion was spent really to court these handful of undecided voters. And amongst them, I think if in the last week or several days, you are undecided, then you're probably not going to vote. I think I know many people who, they're on the fence. They're not going to be voting, and sort of they didn't bring it upon themselves.
Mr. Palla, sorry, may I interrupt you once again? Ramesh is
Mark,
here with us with an update.
News, again, in news just coming in. Again, a projection, Mark. Just to remind the viewers, these are projections. Trump is projected to win the key swing state of Georgia, 51 to 48. That's what reports are suggesting. Trump winning a fourth state now after Indiana, South Carolina, Kentucky,
and this is
now Georgia.
According to AP.
16 electoral college votes going there to Trump. These are projections, mind you.
Oh, they are projections. They're not been called by the...
Not yet. So we have 28 plus 16, 44 as of now going to Trump, and only 3 in Vermont going Harris's way.
Okay. So one of the swing states, at least, we can see that there has at least a projection towards Trump. Carry on, Ms. Uppala. Sorry, I interrupted you for that bit of breaking news.
This is fantastic that it's come at the right time, because when you look at pathways for both of these candidates to the White House, as far as Trump is concerned, if he wins Georgia and North Carolina, I think that's much of the legwork done. It's almost a 90% chance that he's going to win, because those are such key states, and so winning both of them, and then maybe he'll pick up another either Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or Michigan. I think that will do it for him. For Harris, she has to maintain her blue wall. She has to win all 3 key states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. It's very doable, but it's to win all 3 of them, and it's possible, but it's not easy. I think if she loses Georgia, that's a huge blow for her. She pretty much has to win almost everything from now on end, I think, if she loses both North Carolina and Georgia. So, I mean, yeah, these are just projections, but I think these are trends, right? They seem to be showing the projections are voting. So I think we might have a result by the end of tonight. I just want a landslide either way. I don't want questions in a highly contested election where half the people think that the other side cheated, and they feel like their voice was a waste.
Ms. Uppal, also, what Ramesh was saying earlier about the fact that democracy is the #1 issue in this election. We were talking about some of the other issues. We talked about, the economy and abortion. But if democracy is the #1 issue, how would you view that, the manner in which it has been portrayed? The Republicans, at least the MAGA Republicans, believe that the Democrats, when they take over the popular vote and they take over the institutions, will become a single-party system over a period of time, and then that's the end of democracy. And of course, the Democrats feel that the Republicans are beginning to take over control of the judicial systems and run down the rest of the democratic institutions to a large extent, and they believe that democracy is under threat. But how do you view it as a voter?
I absolutely think democracy is such a crucial issue, but I would say it's from both sides. And just like you mentioned, from the left, I think the risk is, the total really weaponizing different institutions and having a situation where perhaps there's a large section of the other side that doesn't feel safe or that they're not heard. There's that, and also when you look at the democratic process to elect a nominee, I think there's a lot of even independents and libertarians who would make the claim that the DNC has not been democratic in the fashion that it's nominated its candidate, because they didn't have primaries, they didn't have a fair process. There were several candidates that could have probably been extremely popular and would have made it had there been an actual primary. That didn't happen. So,
right.
We can make a claim that way too. And of course, from the right, we have, I think it's well documented what the left thinks of Trump's, what a Trump administration would look like. I think it's interesting to note that the rest of the world doesn't view it in that terms. In those terms, they don't look at democracy being their biggest issue. I think the rest of the world really is looking at geopolitical issues, conflicts, endless wars. No more. I think a lot of them would like to put an end to these wars and not have prolonging.
Sure, but the rest of the world is not voting in the election. That's the problem. Anyway, thanks a lot, Ms. Preeti Uppala. Thank you for being with us for the moment. I understand that you have other commitments. Thanks for being with us. Right. Ramesh, you were telling us about the issue of democracy. When we look at the US, it has this two-party system, but there have been attempts to make it more than a two-party system, which have all been failed. So in that extent, to that extent, how do you see this issue of democracy being really an issue that is troubling the US voter?
In fact, these numbers, Mark, would surprise many because conventional wisdom dictated leading up to the polls, the polling day, that three key issues were immigration, economy, and of course the issue of the abortion or reproductive rights. So these three key issues dominated the campaigning. But if these results are anything to go by, it completely changes the argument on its head, so to speak, with 35%, the maximum number of voters saying that for them, democracy trumps everything else, including economy, jobs, abortion, reproductive rights, immigration, and even foreign policy. And that, to my mind, will determine the outcome of the elections in the key swing states in particular, especially now given the fact that the trend suggests that Trump is projected to win the first of the 7 key states of Georgia, where 16 seats are up for grabs. So clearly things pointing in a certain direction, but these are still early days. We'll have to wait and watch and take the numbers as they trickle in.
Professor Rajan Kumar, you've studied and lived in America. So, to what extent do you look at the issue of democracy? The two-party system, the failure of other parties, of independents to make any ground. In fact, if we look at this whole issue of Donald Trump, he's been considered an outsider. And, the first time he won, there was this whole thing that 84%, even now, it appears that, 84% of the media is against him. And he's still considered an outsider to the establishment, even though he served a 4-year term. So how do you view this?
I think, Mark, in my view, America was never an ideal democracy, but given even the limitations were under control because of the very powerful institutions like judiciary, separation of power, etc. And then media was very powerful, media was not controlled. But of late, what has happened that all those institutions have declined, and there's a kind of there's a competition between the two parties to grab the institutions, and Trump has successfully done that by appointing judges in the Supreme Court, and also by controlling media. Recently, you have seen that because you come from media, Washington Post had the convention of endorsing a candidate, but this time realizing that the result may go any side, it might go towards Trump also. So this time, Washington Post, one of the most important newspapers of the United States, it refused to endorse any candidate. So what is happening that there is some kind of fear, intimidation, which has gone into the institutions, be it media, be it judiciary, be it civil society, and also as far as democracy is concerned, what has happened that people are divided, because let's remember that approximately about 19% of the population now would be Hispanic population in the United States. So that is a major minority there, 19% I'm saying. And it has increased very fast in the last few years. And then you have 12% black population. So, and the Democratic Party representing that minority. So you can imagine the kind of politics which is being played out by the Democratic Party. Right. And America is a multi-party system, and there are various parties there. But only thing is that the two parties are the dominant parties. Even other parties, Green Party, etc. But they do get vote 5 to 6%, and people are saying that this time, Trump, because the Green Party candidate, that party, supported Trump. So that has gone in favor of Trump also, Trump this time. So, America has become very polarized. The biggest threat to democracy is from a very, kind of fascist ideology, very centralizing ideology. If there is a cult figure emerging in democracy, and that is dangerous for any democracy, and that is what we are seeing in United States happening today. Whoever wins is a different issue. But even if, say, for instance, even if Trump loses, the impact of Trumpism will remain for a long time, and he has already done the damage whatever could have been done. And now, as you see in Georgia, he's winning. So we never know. That can be a shocking news for Kamala Harris. And the way Georgia votes, and North Carolina is very close state, neighboring state. And if North Carolina is also lost, then Trump might be the winner also. So democracy is under real threat, and because America was a champion of democracy, and America used to support democracy in other countries through regime change, through other methods, through funding, etc. So that America as a leader of democracy will be questioned throughout the world, and it was always questioned. But now, if you have a leader like Trump who does not believe in democracy, he also said just a few days back that he'll accept the result only if the election is fair. Now the question is, who decides whether the election is fair or not? Trump believes that only his supporters will decide whether the election has been fair or not, which means that he does not believe in the existing institution of the United States, and that's not good for democracy. And even we have doubt, the fact that we have doubts that whether he'll accept the election result or not, that kind of shows the problems which have crept into American system and democracy, and how institutions are not being trusted by people from both sides, from the left, hardcore radical left, but also from the right side. So that shows kind of crisis which has come into American democracy today.
Mark, if I can quickly update our viewers on the closing, the polls closing in more states. Remember, we'd spoken about 6 states where polls closed. 3 more have been added to the list. North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia. Polls have closed in these 3 states as well, taking the total number of states where polls have closed to 9. And at the moment, just to repeat for the benefit of viewers, Trump is projected to win 4 states: Indiana, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Georgia. Georgia is one of those 7 key states, swing states, that we have to watch out for. And Kamala Harris is projected to win only 1 state so far, that of Vermont, which has 3 electoral college votes up for grabs.
Well, as the U.S. votes to elect its 47th president, DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh has tracked the mood of voters in Washington, D.C. Let's listen to what they said.
We are in Washington, D.C., outside of a polling station. It's evening, but the long queues of voters are still visible. Similar queues we have seen at polling stations across Washington, D.C. Just as record number of voters had polled in the early voting, similar record-breaking numbers are also visible in this big election day. We'll have to wait and see if it breaks the record of 2020, when some 2/3 of the registered voter had cast their ballot. It has been a closely fought contest, a polarizing contest between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. We spoke to some voters to understand what was on their mind as they cast their ballot.
Most important issues for me: reproductive freedoms, better resources for kids that are not in higher class, like lower class resources, because like Kamala Harris says, we didn't just fall out of a coconut tree, we are the product of our environment. And then my other very important issue would be funding for community colleges, public schools, not private schools.
For me, it's like rights on women's bodies and people of color. Like, I think more of us need to go out there and vote, because a lot of us feel like we don't have a voice, but we're here right now, and like in our society, like with all our freedoms, because we voted in all those like past elections. So I think we need to continue that, and I think the younger generation, everybody's like getting out there and voting.
I think what you're seeing are 2 really clear contrasting visions for how do we be a country that says we can uphold the best of American values, we can keep families together, versus someone who wants to pull people apart in Donald Trump. And in Kamala Harris, somebody who We may not agree on everything, but someone who says we'll all be better if we can work together, if we can be a more fair economy, if we can be a better democracy, if women have the right to choose, if immigrants have a place here, and we can keep families together, versus Donald Trump, who's promising to pull not just immigrant families apart, try to pull the fabric of this country apart. And so there's a big line behind us. Now, we should make it much easier for vote. That's enthusiasm, but it's also a policy choice.
I'm worried about Donald Trump's attack on democracy. He shouldn't have been allowed to run after January 6th in the first place.
The most important issues for me, probably the economy, our spending, our foreign spending, the wars that are going on in the war world right now.
So record number of voting on the election day here in United States, but the political action is far from over. From here, we'll move to the counting stage. That is when we will have an idea about who is coming out on top between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and who's likely to become the next president of the United States of America. With camera person Jaishankar, Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in Washington, D.C.
Right, we'll get a word in from Professor Rajan Kumar. Professor Rajan Kumar, we were talking about the democracy being an issue, and you were explaining a number of aspects about the U.S. system, but and also the threats which many of these voters also expressed about Donald Trump. But the point is that Donald Trump, as I said earlier, is an outsider to the system, and he's a disruptive force because the system has become stale. It's functioning in a particular way. So he's trying to bring, isn't that a democratic way of doing it, to be elected and to come and try and change the system from within?
Thank you. I forgot to answer that question earlier, but in America, I won't consider that he's coming from the outside system. America, that American elites, they control the system through different methods. Yes, he does not come from a political family background. That's correct, and he does not have that legacy of what Clintons and other people, and they have. And that way, this Kamala Harris also is not coming from political, except that she is a current vice president. But beyond that, let me tell you that American system is also controlled by the lobbies. And be it the liberal lobby, be it the climate lobby, be it the farmers lobby, and be it the corporate lobby. So the reason I'm saying that Trump is not coming from outside the system, the so-called, because there are different poles in the American political system and the economic system, and those poles are controlled by powerful lobbies, and Trump is part of that establishment. The fact that Trump made billions of dollars by saving taxes and by the playing with the institutions, playing with the laws, tax laws, etc., forming multiple companies. When one company was losing, he formed the other company. So through those methods, he was also a part of economic establishment. Yes, he was not the part of the traditional political elite family, but yes, he was part of the economic system which controls America. And corporate, as you know, corporate America is extremely powerful, and the gap between the rich and poor is very, very high, much higher than probably India also.
Right.
So in that situation, he was a part of broader economic establishment, but yes, he was not from political background, and that's why people in the first time 2016 election, when he was contesting against Hillary Clinton, so he was a favorite for American people, because people are thinking that George Bush Jr., before that George Bush Sr., and earlier Clinton, and now his wife. So people revolted against that, that kind of lobby, which was trying to throw up same kind of candidate from the family, etc. And Trump became the winner in 2016. But the way Trump followed the policies, especially on the issue of democracy, large number of people, especially the younger people, women and immigrants, they turned completely against Trump. But the white conservative voters in the white belt, so-called belt, they remain committed to Trump. They still support Trump. They think that the American system is not working well, and they blame immigrants and the representative of immigrants like Democratic Party for that. Although be it Trump, be it Kamala Harris, let me tell you that there'll not be too much of surge in American economy irrespective of whoever comes, because the rest of the world has started growing, and that has certainly impacted US in multiple ways. Trump stands for what he calls exceptionally.
Right.
America first kind of policy, and that may not serve America in the long term. The fact that America is growing and Europe is not growing is partly because of the intelligent immigrant population who are coming from other places and they're willing to work in the United States. So, and in European countries, that working population is declining. Immigrants are not allowed. So, America has major advantage because of immigration. But Trump's policy of America first, anti-immigration policy, will go against America.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Rajan Kumar, Professor, School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you for joining us for the moment.